The phone rang like a gunshot in the quiet of Chandler Hawthorne's kitchen, shattering the fragile peace he'd built over decades of swallowed secrets. "Dad, you can't come." Amelia's voice cracked through the line, sharp as the November wind off Penobscot Bay. "Not like this, not with him. Carter's family. They'll never understand, and I can't risk it. Please, just stay away." Chandler gripped the edge of the scarred oak table, the one his father had carved by hand back when Haven Point was just a cluster of lobster traps and dreams that never quite surfaced. The words hung there, heavier than the fog that rolled in from the Atlantic every dawn, turning his world, a world of weathered docks and whispered confessions, into something unrecognizable. At 58, he'd finally clawed his way to authenticity, only for his own blood to draw the line at the altar. He'd known this call was coming ever since Amelia's engagement photo hit his inbox 6 months back. Her radiant smile beside Carter Chandler, the golden boy from inland Augusta with his family's sprawling farm and a lineage that traced back to the Mayflower, or so they claimed. Chandler had stared at that image for hours, tracing the joy in her eyes, the same hazel flecks that mirrored his own. She'd been his anchor through the divorce, through the years of half-truths and late-night apologies to a boy he'd buried deep inside himself. And now, on the eve of her wedding, she was cutting the rope. But it wasn't just the band that gutted him. It was the footnote, the unspoken rule that Levi, the man who'd mended Chandler's fractures over 20 quiet years, wasn't welcome either. Levi Grant, with his steady hands and that laugh like gravel under tires, the one who'd coaxed Chandler out of the closet at 45, after a heart scare on the docks nearly dragged him under for good. They'd built a life in the shadows of Haven Point, shared suppers of chowder and cod, walks along the pebbled shore where hands brushed without fear, nights tangled in flannel sheets that smelled of pine and salt. Levi wasn't a phase. He was the exhale after a lifetime of holding breath. Chandler sank into the chair, the wood creaking under his weight, and let the silence stretch. Outside, the bay churned, gray waves slapping against the pilings like accusations. He'd always pictured this day differently, standing at the back of some white-steepled church in Augusta, his calloused palm on Amelia's arm as she walked toward forever. Instead, he was here, alone in the cottage that had been his refuge and his prison, the walls lined with faded photos. Amelia at 5, gap-toothed and fearless on a swing. Him and her mother, Sarah, before the cracks showed. And tucked in the back, a candid of him and Levi at dawn, backs to the camera, silhouetted against the rising sun. The divorce had been Sarah's mercy, really. She'd suspected for years, the way Chandler's eyes lingered on the rough-hewn men at the cannery, the excuses for late shifts that stretched into solitary walks along the breakwater. When she confronted him one rain-lashed evening in '98, her voice had been steady, not shattered. "Go find your truth, Eli," she'd said, packing his sea bag with a tenderness that still haunted him. Amelia needs a father who isn't half a ghost. They'd co-parented in fits and starts, Sarah remarrying a solid accountant from Bangor, while Chandler threw himself into the boats, hauling traps until his hands bled and his heart numbed. Amelia had been 12 when he came out to her, over ice cream at the parlor on Main Street, the kind with chunks of whoopie pie that stuck to the roof of your mouth. She'd licked her spoon clean and said, "Does this mean you'll stop looking sad all the time?" God, that innocence, it had nearly broken him open right there. For years after, she'd been his champion, dragging him to pride floats in Portland, teasing him about his mysterious dockside dates, before Levi became a fixture. But college in Boston changed her, the polish of city life, the internship at that law firm where she met Carter, whose family crest practically screamed old money and older prejudices. Chandler glanced at the clock, 3:47 p.m., and realized Levi would be home soon from the hardware store in town. The man had a ritual, keys jangling like wind chimes, boots thudding on the porch, then that slow grin as he shrugged off his jacket, revealing the tattoo on his forearm, a compass rose, inked during their first trip to Provincetown. Chandler had gotten a matching one, hidden under his sleeve for work, the needles by a vow he'd whispered into Levi's ear. "North is wherever you are." But tonight, that compass felt demagnetized. He pushed to his feet, the floorboards groaning like old bones, and crossed to the window. Haven Point sprawled below, the crooked lighthouse sentinel to shipwrecks past, the fleet of dories bobbing like forgotten promises, the single stoplight flickering at the intersection where the general store sold bait and baited gossip. This was Maine, stubborn, salt-crusted, where queerness was whispered about like a nor'easter on the horizon. Chandler had thrived here once, in the rhythm of tides and tall tales, but now it felt like a cage with the door ajar. The screen door banged open hours later, Levi's voice cutting through the haze. "Eli? You look like you wrestled a bluefin and lost." He dropped his keys on the counter, those green eyes, faded like sea glass, narrowing as he took in the scene. The untouched coffee, the wedding invite crumpled like a casualty. Chandler couldn't meet his gaze. She called. "Amelia. Said I can't come tomorrow." "None of it. The ceremony, the reception. Because of us." Levi froze, then crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling Chandler into a bear hug that smelled of sawdust and certainty. "Christ, that's her mother's side talking, not you." Sarah's gone soft on the Chandler clan, probably to keep the peace for that fancy reception hall they're renting. But Chandler pulled back, the ache blooming fresh. "It's not just Sarah. Amelia's scared, Leviticus Carter's folks. They're the type who pray the rainbow away at Sunday supper. And she's chosen them over." He trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the space between them, the life they'd pieced together from driftwood and determination. Levi's jaw tightened, that old fisherman's resolve surfacing. Born in Texas but transplanted north after his own divorce, he brought a drawl softened by years and a heart scarred by similar rejections. "We've danced this 2-step before, darlin'. Remember '08, when the cannery laid us off? We patched the roof in a gale, sang off-key to keep warm. This is just another storm." Chandler wanted to believe it, but the words stuck like barnacles. That night, they lay awake, the ceiling fan stirring shadows, Levi's fingers tracing lazy circles on Chandler's chest. "What if I write her a letter?" Chandler murmured into the dark. "Something to read after. Lay it all out. The why of us, the love that's kept me whole." Levi hummed approval, but sleep came fitful, dreams tangled with white lace and waves crashing over vows unspoken. Dawn broke gray and unrelenting, the kind of Maine morning that seeped into your bones. Chandler rose before Levi, slipping into the study, a converted porch cluttered with nautical charts and half-finished whittlings. The will sat on the desk, updated just last month after his doctor's grim nod to the creeping arthritis in his hips. It wasn't much. The cottage, the savings from 20 years of overtime, a plot on the family cemetery overlooking the bay. All to Amelia, with a codicil for Levi, half the proceeds if she contested, and a letter sealed with wax, detailing the man who'd been his harbor. He sealed the envelope now, the paper whispering like a confession, and tucked it into the larger packet. For after, he told himself, as if timing could mend what choice had torn. By noon, he'd driven the hour to Augusta, the coastal road winding through pines that blurred into emerald streaks. The law office was a brick relic downtown, all polished brass and leather-bound tomes, where Chandler's old friend Harlan waited behind a desk that dwarfed him. "Ellie Hawthorne, as I live and breathe," Harlan boomed, his bow tie askew as always. They'd crewed together in high school, swapping stories of girls they'd never chased. Harlan knew the truth, had toasted it at their commitment ceremony in a backyard lit by mason jars. "This the final draft? No takebacks once it's filed." Chandler nodded, sliding the folder across. "Make sure it's ironclad. And the letters, deliver them post-wedding, to her and the Chandlers. Figure it'll hit harder when the rice is still on the ground." Harlan's eyes softened behind his bifocals. "You're a poet with pain, Eli. Amelia's lucky to have you, even if she's too bullheaded to see it yet." They clasped hands, the grip lingering, a silent pact between survivors. Back home, Levi had the truck loaded for a run to the flea market in Rockland, antiques to flip, a distraction from the void. "Come on," he coaxed, tossing Chandler the keys. Nothing clears the head like haggling over a bent harpoon. The drive north was a balm, windows down to let the briny air scour the wound. They bartered for a brass lantern that Levi swore would light their porch like stars, laughed over a vendor's tall tale of mermaids in Muscongas Bay. 4 stolen hours. It was just them. 2 men in their late 50s, creased and content, the world shrinking to the cab of a Ford F-150. But evening brought the broadcast. A local news clip on the community channel, Amelia's rehearsal dinner flickering across the screen. There she was, ethereal in ivory, Carter's arm possessive around her waist, his parents beaming like they'd brokered world peace. No mention of Chandler, no empty chair acknowledged. Levi muted it, pulling him close on the sagging couch. "Tomorrow's hers. Ours comes after." Sleep evaded again, the clock ticking toward midnight like a countdown. Chandler dreamed of Amelia as a child, her tiny hand in his, dragging him to the tide pools to name the crabs. "This one's Captain Chandler," she'd declare, plopping a shell on his palm. Waking to Levi's snores, he wondered if she'd name her regrets so kindly. The wedding day dawned with a deceptive clarity, sun gilding the bay like fool's gold. Chandler busied himself with chores, mending nets in the shed, the rhythmic slap of twine a mantra against the pull of what-ifs. Levi left for the store early, promising lobster rolls for lunch, the good kind, with extra butter, but his kiss at the door lingered, heavy with the unsaid. By afternoon, the isolation pressed in. Chandler wandered the shore, boots sinking into wet sand, gulls wheeling overhead like indifferent judges. He thought of Sarah, who'd texted a terse, "She's beautiful, Eli. Wish you were there," with a photo, Amelia mid-vow, eyes shining. The image blurred through unshed tears. How had they arrived here, father and daughter, divided by the very love that defined him? A call from Harlan jarred him back. Ceremonies wrapping. Reception at the old mill, fancy spread, from what I hear. "You holding?" "Barely," Chandler admitted, voice rough as oyster shells. "Just get those letters where they need to be." As dusk fell, Levi returned with the rolls and a six-pack, settling them on the porch swing with the ease of ritual. They ate in companionable quiet, the bay a mirror for the bruised sky. "Tell me about the first time you knew," Levi prompted, his head on Chandler's shoulder, the question a bridge over the chasm. Chandler exhaled, the memory surfacing like a breaching whale. Summer of '79. Working the draggers out of Portland. There was this deckhand, Jude, with hands like mine but eyes that saw right through. One night, after a haul that near sank us, he passed me a flask under the stars. Our fingers touched, and it was like lightning without the storm. Knew then I wasn't built for the straight and narrow. Levi chuckled low. Took me longer. Married at 20, 2 kids by 25. Woke up one morning in Abilene staring at the ceiling, wondering why my heart beat double time for the ranch hand fixing fences. Divorced her gentle, moved north to chase ghosts. Found you instead. Their lips met then, salt and solace, the kiss deepening as the stars pricked the velvet dark. In the cottage's glow, they made love slow and deliberate, bodies mapping familiar territories, scars from surgeries, freckles from forgotten sons. It was reclamation, this union against the exile, a fierce tenderness that whispered, "We are enough." Yet morning brought the echo of absence. Chandler checked his phone compulsively, half hoping for a miracle text from Amelia. "Dad, I was wrong. Come." But the screen stayed blank, a digital grave. Levi, sensing the spiral, suggested a drive to Acadia, clear the cobwebs with some real granite underfoot, and Chandler agreed, anything to outrun the hollow. The park's trails were a revelation. Ancient rocks carved by glaciers, windswept pines clinging to cliffs like defiant lovers. They hiked the ocean path, hands linked where no eyes judged, the crash of surf a symphony to their steps. At Thunderhole, where waves roared into a cleft like thunderclaps, Levi pulled him close. "This is us, Eli. Raw, relentless, beautiful in the breaking." Tears came unbidden, hot on Chandler's cheeks, mingling with the spray. "I just wanted her to see that. To choose me as I am." "She will," Levi vowed, fierce as the tide. "Blood like yours doesn't forget." Back home by evening, the first crack appeared, a voicemail from an unknown Augusta number. Chandler played it on speaker, heart hammering. "Mr. Hawthorne? This is Margaret Chandler, Carter's mother. We'd like to speak with you. Urgently. It's about Amelia's father. Well, you. And something Harlan just delivered." The line had gone dead, but the implication lingered like smoke. The will. The letters. Whatever Harlan had dropped into the reception's fray had ignited a fuse. Chandler's pulse thrummed as he dialed back, but it rang to voicemail, Margaret's voice crisp and clipped. "Please return at your earliest." Levi paced the kitchen, brewing coffee strong as tar. "What did you put in that codicil, Eli?" "Must have been a haymaker." "Just the truth," Chandler said, sinking into a chair. "About us. About why I fought so hard to live it. And a clause. If she ever cuts me out like this, the cottage goes to you. Not spite. Protection." Levi stopped, cup midway to his lips. "Damn, that's not just paper. That's a gauntlet." The call came at 9:17 p.m., jolting them from a tense dinner of canned soup. Margaret's tone was thawed, almost contrite. "Chandler? Thank God. Can you come to the farm tomorrow? Breakfast, say 8 a.m.? Carter and Amelia. They're here. We all read it." "Read what exactly?" His voice steadied, though his free hand clenched Levi's under the table. The will. The letters. Chandler, it's more than we bargained for. A pause, heavy with implication. Please. For her sake. He agreed, the drive mapped in his mind. 40 minutes inland, past fields fallow for winter. Levi insisted on coming. Backups non-negotiable. And they crashed early, tangled in worry and warmth. Sleep was shallow, dreams fragmented, Amelia's face dissolving into waves, Levi's hand slipping from his. Dawn found them on the road, the truck's heater blasting against the chill, Haven Point receding in the rear view like a half-remembered shore. The Chandler farm loomed at road's end, white-clapboard farmhouse, silos like sentinels, a spread that screamed generational grit. Carter met them at the door, tie askew, eyes red-rimmed. Not the polished groom from photos, but a man unmoored. Mr. Hawthorne, Chandler. Come in. Coffee's on. The kitchen was a time capsule, checkered linoleum, a harvest table groaning under Danish and fruit. Amelia sat at the far end, pale as milk, her ring glinting like an accusation. Sarah flanked her, hand on shoulder, while Harlan nursed a mug in the corner, nodding grimly. Margaret and Tom Chandler presided at the head, faces etched with the night's revelations. Chandler, Amelia started, voice fracturing. The letter. What you wrote about Mom, about hiding from me. And Levi, her gaze flicked to him, softening. I didn't know. About the cancer scare last year, how he held you through it. God, Dad, why didn't you say? You said stay away, he replied, simple as that. Taking the seat Levi pulled out. The air thickened, coffee steaming like unspoken apologies. Tom cleared his throat, a bear of a man with calluses from dairy herds. That will. It's a mirror, son. We Chandlers, we talk a good game about family values, but reading your words, about loving quiet, about choosing truth over comfort, it hit like a cold front. And the clause, leaving the cottage to Levi if Amelia turns her back? That's not revenge, that's resolve. Made us reckon with our own. Margaret slid the letter across, edges worn from multiple hands. Chandler's script stared back. Amelia, love isn't a switch you flip for weddings. It's the tide that wears stone smooth. Levi's my tide. If you can't see that, know I built this life for you to choose better. Carter spoke then, voice low. I pushed her on this, Chandler. Thought it'd keep peace with my folks. But last night, after Harlan dropped the packet mid-toasts, we talked till dawn. Amelia cried for hours. Said she was scared I'd bolt if the truth came out. Chandler's chest tightened, gaze locking on his daughter. And I'm not bolting, Carter said, reaching for her hand. Not from you, not from this. We want you both at the rescheduled vows, small, next weekend. On your terms. The room held its breath, all eyes on Amelia. She rose, crossing to Chandler, knees buckling as she sank into his lap, like the girl who'd chased fireflies in the yard. I'm sorry, Dad. So damn sorry. I banned you because I was ashamed of my own fear, not you. But reading that, it broke me open. I want you there, with Levi, as family. Tears carved paths down her cheeks, and Chandler pulled her close. The scent of her shampoo, lavender, same as Sarah's, flooding him with yesterday's. Levi's hand found his shoulder, an anchor in the swell, while the Chandlers watched, their prejudices cracking like thin ice. What followed was a tentative thaw. Stories swapped over second cups, Harlan cracking wise about Maine's stubbornness, Tom admitting to a cousin who'd marched in the first Pride Parade in Boston. Laughter bubbled, fragile but real, as sunlight slanted through gingham curtains. By noon, they parted with plans, vows at the lighthouse in Haven Point, officiant a local pastor who'd married Chandler's parents. Driving home, Levi cranked the radio to an old Springsteen track, Thunder Road, the boss's howl hymn to redemption. You did it, Eli. Not with fists, but with that stubborn heart. Chandler glanced at the bay, now sparkling under a benevolent sun. We did. But it's not the end, it's the start. The lighthouse ceremony was intimate, salt air mingling with vows exchanged under a sky vast as forgiveness. Amelia, in simple lace, walked the aisle on Sarah's arm, but her eyes sought Chandler at the arch, Levi beside him in a crisp button-down that hid his tattoo but not his pride. Carter stood tall, no trace of yesterday's doubt, his hand steady as he promised forever. As rings slid into place and cheers rose from the handful gathered, Harlan whooping, Margaret dabbing her eyes, Chandler felt the pieces slot home. Not perfect, these bonds laced with scars, but resilient as lobster line. After, on the beach, toes in the surf, Amelia pulled him aside. The will don't change it, Dad. Keep the clause. It's your truth, and I need to earn it every day. He nodded, throat tight, watching Levi toss a frisbee with Carter, their laughter carrying on the breeze. In that moment, Haven Point felt infinite, a haven not just of harbors, but of hearts finally aligned. Months blurred into seasons, the wedding a pivot point. Amelia and Carter settled in a fixer-upper outside Augusta. Weekends spent at the cottage where Levi taught them to shuck oysters, stories flowing freer than the ale. Chandler's arthritis slowed him, but Levi's care was a constant. Nights with heating pads and hushed nothings, mornings with coffee and the classifieds for part-time gigs. One crisp October eve, as leaves turned the bay to fire, Chandler revised the will, not the clause, but the legacy, a trust for future grandkids, stipulating lessons in compassion, in loving without ledger. Harlan notarized it with a wink. You're writing epics now, Eli. And in quiet hours, Chandler and Levi walked the shore, hands clasped against the chill, the compass tattoos peeking like secrets shared. Worth the wait? Levi asked once, as stars wheeled overhead. Every wave, Chandler replied, pulling him into the dark. For in the end, family wasn't blood or bands. It was the choice to show up, scars bared, and build bridges from the wreckage. And in Haven Point, where tides turned eternal, that was freedom enough.